Let's open a word of prayer. Lord, we just pray that you bless our time together today as we discuss some very difficult topics. We pray for our country, that you will guide and direct to your glory in the upcoming elections, and pray that you will, as we pray for the peace of Jerusalem, we pray for peace in the United States and many other places in the world. We just pray that you will bless our time together. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, today I'm going to title this, Are We On or Past the Brink? And the answer, I actually Googled whether I should say at the brink or on the brink, and Google and a bunch of language experts said it should be on the brink. So, because we're really on the edge of the abyss, in my opinion, the edge of a cliff, on the brink, whatever you want to call it, with what's going on in the country. I was just telling some people here, I don't think that this week's update is going to be as upbeat as usual. I know I say that with some, all the cynicism that I can muster. Just a couple of, and I know people don't like this, but I'm going to do it anyway. So if you want to fast forward about a minute and a half, so you miss this part, that's fine. I did do an interview this week with Seth Frantzman of the Jerusalem Post. You can find that at YouTube channel. And it's only 36 minutes, so Seth is great. I hope to interview him more in the future. Also, there is a possibility that in November, around November 21st, the leading Israeli Arab, Jewish Arab expert in the world may be here at FBC. That's Dr. Mordecai Kedar. I'm working on that. Just pray that works. I think that it's tentatively scheduled for November 21st. And if not, I'm going to get him for an interview. But he is in the U.S. I know he's going to be in California just after I'm out there next week. Tuesday night, I will be doing an update live from Calvary Chapel of the Harbor in Huntington Beach, California, with Tom Hughes and Pastor Joe Pettick of that church. They should start at 7 p.m. Pacific, so you can watch that and just drift off to sleep right after you listen to our update on election night. I'm sure all the results will be in, all the votes will be counted, all the election challenges will be over, right? Right. And what I don't get to today, we'll probably cover there. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'll be speaking at the End of the World Conference. I'm speaking on Friday afternoon. So it'll be late afternoon here in Ohio. The End of the World Conference, you can go to hopeforourtimes.com and you can get that information at their events page and register. And there is a cost for the live streaming to defray costs, but it's also to raise money for Gihon Springs and some of the things going on in Israel and outreach that's being done there. So I always talk about, what am I going to talk about? And so this is sort of my working title for Friday, at the appointed time. Comes from Daniel chapter 11, that these things are going to happen at the appointed time. A lot of times we sit there and say, well, why hasn't that happened yet? Because it's not the appointed time. But it's by the way, this is at the appointed time, that's correct. It wouldn't be on the appointed time, right? It's on the brink, but at the appointed time. So I'm trying to get all of that straight language-wise. This is what my mind looks like as we're doing things. And I've often said that I've been working on my wheel of prophecy. Just take that for a spin sometime and talk on whatever it lands on. By the way, you have no idea how much time that takes to do that, but that's neither here. I don't want any praise or anything for that. And we talk about this acceleration, convergence, logistics, and understanding. And let me just ask you a question. Does it seem like things are accelerating? When we talk about end times Bible prophecy events that we should be looking for, does it seem like they're converging? And then there are logistics. And I will, if I have time today, I'll get to logistics. And again, what I don't get to today, probably Tom and I will get to in the end, as we're sort of at the beginning of this period of time where we're going to see the seals. I don't think they're open yet. This is a big controversial thing. The seals opening, the horsemen riding. But I think one of the things that we need to understand is that when these horsemen ride, the white horse, red horse, black horse, and green horse, or sometimes called the pale horse. I think green horse is a better characteristic. By the way, look at the colors. What colors do you see? White, red, black, green. Okay, is there any countries in the world that have those colors in their flags? And the answer is yeah, in the Middle East, almost every single one of them has all 4 or 3 or 2 of those colors. But I'm sure it's just a coincidence, right? Oh, what was the old saying that I used to hear all the time? Coincidence is not a kosher word. So we're looking at that, and then we're at this time where I think we're going to start seeing things. Daniel, the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified, made white and refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And in Daniel 11, it says the wise will understand and instruct many. So I think we're at this period of time where we're going to be reworking our prophetic timelines. We're going to be reworking how we think things are going to play out. Because this week it's been just an incredible week. So let's get into this. I'm going to first start off with some of the things about the election in the United States. We've got these things going on with AI. This is the EU's proposed, this is from a few weeks ago. I just haven't had time to get to it. Proposing digital passports and ID cards for easier travel. Digital ID, personal digital wallet. This is an article by Sam Altman a month ago at his blog. He wrote a blog post. He's the head of OpenAI. And by the way, OpenAI, if you want to feel comfortable about how AI is going, and if you're concerned about safety and that type of things with regard to AI, just know that OpenAI got rid of all their safety people. And I think we should all be very, very concerned about that. But Sam Altman wrote a blog post at his blog called The Intelligent Age. What happened right after he wrote that, within a couple days, the World Economic Forum came out with this. And I'm sure this is just a coincidence, but they had read that blog post, and that's going to be the main theme of the conference that they're having in Davos in January or February. The Intelligent Age, a time for cooperation. So it's this convergence of things. The OpenAI guy talks about this. The Intelligent Age, he thinks we're going to reach superintelligence within a few thousand days. So he sort of gave it a little bit of an open-ended thing. And I don't know that they'll ever get to the goal of what they want, but the fact of the matter is they're trying, and there's going to be tech intrusion like you have never seen before. I mean, the largest companies in the world now, and so they're talking about the fact that, this is Klaus Schwab, article part of the World Economic Forum annual meeting, rapid advancements in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and blockchain have propelled us into the intelligent age. If managed cooperatively and mindfully, this revolution can enhance human potential. Social, geopolitical, technological, and environmental intelligence will be fundamental to success in the intelligent age. Let's see here. This is... And we see some additional things happening. Let me see if this is... By the way, this Jared Kushner tweet will probably be part of my talk in California. I'll talk about Spain and a little bit later, just absolutely horrible things that we've seen. Hundreds of people still missing, hundreds of people dead. NVIDIA is going to replace Intel and the Dow Industrial Average. Sherwin-Williams is, so I guess you need artificial intelligence to figure out how to paint your house or something. I don't know. Maybe that's what you should take away from that. They're building this giant supercomputer. They're installing, it's the largest government-sponsored supercomputer in Denmark, and they're going to use it for everything. And they're going to solve change. Here's a lady at Microsoft. She's a budget hawk, but she's now leading a $64.5 billion spending spree by Microsoft, mainly in the areas of artificial intelligence. So NVIDIA, OpenAI, Microsoft, Apple. If you got a recent Apple update, it has things for artificial intelligence. So here's a guy who's sort of been involved in the tech business. Now, I know you're going to get upset, but he has a few things I want you to listen to. There's going to be about 4 minutes. And he was interviewed this week by Reid Hoffman, who he used to work with in the tech industry, and you'll know who it is when he starts.
Understanding disease, I'm surprised people aren't more curious. You know, when I first said, what do kids die of? I had a hard time finding out. And I would have thought, well, shouldn't we all be asking that kind of thing? It's more important than GDP.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
So where do you see progress or momentum outside of your industry? And of course, that's very broad, that inspires you.
Well, when India's an example of a country where, there's plenty of things that are difficult there. The health, nutrition, education is improving, and they're stable enough and generating their own government revenue enough that it's very likely that 20 years from now, people will be dramatically better off. And it's kind of a laboratory to try things that then, once you prove them out in India, you can take to other places. And so our biggest non-US office for the foundation is in India, and then most number of pilot rollout things we're doing anywhere in the world are with partners in India.
So he's talking about India, and remember he did a thing, the interesting thing about this interview, it's about an hour long. I did listen to it, I gritted my teeth. What one thing would you think Bill Gates would talk about when he's talking about what he accomplishes and his foundation accomplishes and what they are involved in, and talking about how they partner with India? He would talk about, I won't use the term, I would call it the state-approved treatment for Charlie Vector 019er, because he was like one of the big that word that describes that state-approved treatment never comes up. You can check the transcript. It's not there. And so what I think what's going on is, like, whenever somebody does something and things don't turn out too well, they start whitewashing it. And this is a whitewashing interview. Now, I want you to listen to the next thing. They're going to ask them some questions. This is the end of the interview, sort of the penultimate thing. This is what, they're bringing up Bill Gates. What do you want to talk about in summary?
Understanding disease, I'm surprised people aren't more curious. When I first said, what do kids...
That's the same clip I just played, isn't it? So I must have put in the same clip. Here we go. I hope this works.
Understanding.
Well, that's not
disease,
what I wanted to do.
I'm surprised.
So what he talks about is, apparently I overwrote the clip I wanted to play with the other clip, but he talks about the fact that he wants to create a new religion for humanity. That this AI and everything this is a positive thing. This is going to be great. It's going to tell us how to interact. He says, you young people, we got to manage it, because we're going to get to some place where things are going to be so amazing that it's going to want everybody to be more embedded or tied to their devices than they are right now. And we don't want to go too far. We don't want robots playing baseball or sports because they'll be too good at it. And by the way, I've seen some amazing things of these robots kicking footballs that are spinning like crazy and kicking them 70 yards through the uprights right down the middle, which I think some college football coaches would like. But so go listen to the interview. I don't know I think there might be a link in the show notes. If not, just look on YouTube for Gates and Possibility and go to about an hour near the end, about 54 minutes into the thing, and you'll kind of get the money quotes from Bill. And maybe it was an act of mercy that I did the video right, so you didn't have to listen to more of them than you thought. But he's talking about a new religion for humanity. And that's what Sam Altman talks about. That's what these other people talk about. Jeffrey Hinton, who has warned about the problems with AI, just got the Nobel Prize. But everybody's moving down the road on AI. How far they get, I don't think is the issue. The issue is tech intrusion, and that is they're never walking that back. We're never going back absent a massive nuclear war all over the world that destroys all electricity and devices. I just don't see us going back to that. And so here's the local paper. This is probably the most I've read of the local paper in the last 4 or 5 years. Even when I had free access to it at work, I didn't used to read it because I just think it's garbage. Yeah, it's trash. But here's their front page this morning, America on Edge. So now what you're going to see, a lot of people have voted. You're going to see a lot of things over the next couple of days out of the mainstream media. Harris is winning. She's crushing Trump. And I see these polls posted. I don't know if I believe almost any of them, but one of them had Trump leading in everything except Virginia, where they were tied. All the big battleground states. The average of all the polls had Trump leading except one. Oh, look, Kamala Harris is leading Trump. She's crushing him in Iowa. I don't believe that for a minute, but you're going to see this stuff over the next couple of days. Look, we don't want you to go vote because it's not going to make any difference if you go vote for Trump because Kamala Harris is going to win. And then they talk about, the wealthy people are leaving if Trump wins and all this stuff. This is from the Times of the UK. It says this: whoever wins next week, this era of American discord is far from over. And that's pretty accurate. I don't know exactly where this is going to go. We'll know more on Tuesday. I'm not optimistic. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what happens if you know who wins and it's not Trump. Because you need to understand the dire consequences. And look, I know Trump's not perfect. That's not what this is about. By the way, I'm not voting. I didn't vote for pastor in this. I voted for somebody to lead the country. The world is on the brink of world war. Well, it may not be on the brink of world war. It may actually be in world war. And you'll see a little bit about that in a moment. This is the New York Times editorial opinion page, Democracy Handled with Care. And look at some of the titles that they have in their editorial page. This election pits Guardians against counter-revolutionaries. Now, by the way, the Guardians are not people who are voting for Donald Trump. They're the counter-revolutionaries. And so you're going to see this narrative about the election and what's going on in the election. So the other day, Hugh Hewitt, you may know him. He's with Salem Radio. He also writes for the Washington Post. He lives in, I think he has places in California, Maine, and DC. And he was on Washington Times podcast with Jonathan Capehart and Ruth Marcus. And they said, Trump's challenging the election. Look, he's challenging the election. And Hugh said, listen, guys, Trump challenged what they were doing in Pennsylvania. He challenged what they were doing in Virginia. And guess what? The Republican committee that filed those lawsuits won the lawsuits because what they were doing was determined to be wrong by the courts. And he says, why aren't you doing this? You're just presenting this narrative that Trump's challenging the election. He challenged it for valid reasons. And then he just said, then they wanted him, they kind of yelled at him or something, and he just got up and he quit and walked off the set and said, I'm done working for the Washington Post. I'm done working for you guys. So I'll give Hugh Hewitt props for that. And here, look at these things. All the demons are here. What I fear if Trump returns, the beginning of the end, are the articles that are there. And this is a thing, this is also a big narrative. And I think this is a problem. This is a potential problem. Trump got judges appointed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said Roe versus Wade was improperly decided. My left-wing law professors, when I was in law school back in the mid-1970s, said Roe versus Wade was improperly decided. It was overreaching by the court. It made no sense. It was illogical. It was a misreading of the Constitution. It was reading things into the Constitution that weren't there. I think it was in Roe that, sometimes we need to look in the penumbra of the Constitution. The author, I can't remember who wrote the majority opinion in Roe, but he said you look in the penumbra of the Constitution, I mean in the shadows. You don't look in the language of the Constitution, you look in the shadows. And so the decision was it goes back to the states. So now it's gone back to the states, and it's not gone extremely well for the anti-abortion, pro-life people, because we've had 50 years of indoctrination of people in this country that it's a woman's right to choose. The baby is dead. The baby doesn't get to choose. It's anti-child, it's anti-birth, it's anti-life, but that's not what the narrative is. And so a lot of women are upset. And here's an article, how anti-abortion movement lost its candidate. He wrote, high after Roe was overturned, but now faces losses in state ballots as Trump and the GOP see it as a liability. And this is true. So they're compromising. They've stuck their fingers into the wind. But this abortion thing is very big. This is from the Telegraph. And this is true both in England and Scotland now, is my understanding, and I think Ireland. Praying at home may be illegal under this new abortion law that they put in. So what they've done is they've taken like a zone of protection around abortion clinics and hospitals where abortions are performed. And they say you can't do anything anti-abortion in those areas. Even if you're having a prayer meeting in your home that you only invite, if somebody finds out about it, you can be charged under this for violating the act and fined. And I think the fines go up to 10,000 pounds, which is about $13,000. And so this is also from the New York Times a month ago. England introduces buffer zones to ban protests outside abortion clinics, but it goes beyond that. But what we're seeing is you're seeing this narrative. So here's Mike Schellenberger. I think he used to write for the New York Times, and he's talking about the election cycle and what's going on. This is with the guy who has I think one of the greatest YouTube channel names called Triggernometry. And so anyway, here we go.
But let's get to the media part, because that is the main event, as you say. I don't know when I was one of the first. There was another person that said it right around when I did, which was that podcasting plus X is for this election what television was for the 1960 presidential election, which is a new media technology that actually has a significant impact on who wins and what it would take to be a politician in the new age. With JFK over Nixon, it turned out you had to be charming, charismatic, handsome. You had to get your makeup right. And I joked to some people, I was like, when Trump did Rogan, he looked good. He had good makeup, for much better than Hitler. His makeup was perfect. And so you kind of go like, you got to have a look, but really you got to be able to sit for 3 hours with Joe Rogan. And what's really game changing is this whole thing's happening at a time when, I don't know if you followed it, Constantine or people saw it. There's so many stories the last several weeks, but it was CBS 60 Minutes did this interview with Kamala Harris. They had a teaser of it where she was doing word salad, and then they had what they used in 60 Minutes, and she was more articulate. There's now been this big demand to release the full transcript of the interview. I certainly, that's for me, it's a no-brainer, release the whole thing. But you kind of pull back and you go, it's bizarre that anybody would do a long interview, a long video interview, and then you would let somebody else, some giant corporation, decide what the public sees. That's just so right. Now it's like the new template is you do 3 hours with Joe Rogan. If you can't do 3 hours with Joe Rogan, you're not going to succeed anymore in politics. You got to be JFK, you got to be put together, you got to be charming, you got to do 3 hours with Joe Rogan, and then it'll be turned into 1,000 different clips. And they've got so you've got a big opportunity for characters like J.D. Vance and Trump who can actually sit for 3 hours. I just think there's real questions of Kamala Harris. Could she do 3 hours? I mean, it's a really, it's hard to do.
Well, 3 hours that you would really want to listen to, that's torture. So listen, this is Nicholas Kristof in this morning's New York Times, How to End a Democracy. So what you'll see is that if President Trump gets elected, he will be identified as the end of democracy because he was democratically elected. Oh, so being democratically elected doesn't get you past the charge of being anti-democratic. It's insanity what's going on out there. There are ways to keep autocrats out of power. There's a couple professors from, Harvard that wrote this. There are ways to keep autocrats out of power. Why don't we use them? And you're going to see an attack like this. So now one of the attacks is going to be the narrative. The narrative is going to be, for example, Trump is accused of saying he wants to see Liz Cheney executed. So I'm going to play a clip from CNN, and then I'm going to play a little bit of the clip of what Trump actually said. So you can judge for yourself, with my little assistance, and somebody who put this on Twitter, edited properly, not out of context. So here's for CNN, and then President Trump speaking for himself.
4 days out from Election Day, and former President Donald Trump is escalating his violent rhetoric, suggesting one of his most prominent critics, the former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, should be fired upon.
She's a radical war hawk. Let's put her with a rifle standing there with 9 barrels shooting at her, okay? Let's see how she feels about it. When the guns are trained on her face. They're all war hawks when they're sitting in Washington in a nice building saying, oh, gee, let's send.
Okay, can we agree that he did not call for her to be executed? He was saying, oh, look, if you're going to be for war, then go to war and face the enemy soldiers with their guns trained at you. Put your body where your mouth is. He did not call for her to be executed. And if you think that, you really need some assistance. And it is unbelievable. And so I had seen all the claims, and then so I was able to dig out this clip about what did Trump actually say. And you can hear what he says, and then the way they interpret it is just, it's unbelievable. So now one of the things, so let's say that you know who wins, not Trump, but the other person wins. What's going to happen? One of the things that's going to happen is I heard a Republican congressman interviewed the other day, I think it was on War Room podcast. Steve Bannon's back. He's out of prison now. By the way, the Democratic lawyers like Mark Elias are lying. They're lying through their teeth, folks. Mark Elias said Steve Bannon was convicted of a felony. He was not convicted of a felony. He was convicted of a misdemeanor, and I think wrongly convicted, personally, my understanding of the law, but he served time for a misdemeanor in a federal prison in Danbury, Connecticut. That's pretty unusual. And I've represented people who served time. I've been inside prisons. I worked in one for a while when I was in graduate school. There were no misdemeanor people at that prison that I worked at. So Jamie Raskin, who is a lunatic leftist, part of the J6 committee, he has prepared, according to this Republican congressman who was told by a Democratic congressman in the House, that they have prepared articles of impeachment. So if Trump wins and the Democrats get the House and the Senate, articles of impeachment will be filed before Trump is sworn in, because Congress will take their seats in early January after J6, and they will adopt those articles of impeachment. I can almost guarantee you that, as certain as I am that the sun will come up. Well, that always doesn't seem like it comes up some mornings in Ohio when it's cloudy, but the sun does come up every day, sets every day. They will do that. And it will be one after another, after another, after another. I'm just telling you, you need to prepare. They will tear the whole system down. This is true. So here's Jamie Raskin. I guess he got his hair done and he's running for office again as a congressman in California. So he put the do-rag away. Nothing wrong with the do-rag, Charlie, if you're watching this. Here's what he said. This was on Bill Maher the other night.
When I say we will support a free and fair election, no, we're not going to allow them to steal it in the states or steal it at the Department of Justice or steal it with any other election official in the country. If it's a free and fair election, we will do what we've always done. We will honor it.
So, finally. Yeah. And that is the Democrats' history. They honor it. That is the big difference between the parties. One of the big.
What planet is he living on?
And on that point, I'll tell you, the political scientists have told us the hallmark characteristics of a fascist political party. Number one, they don't accept the outcome of democratic elections that don't go their way.
Yeah.
Right? Number two, they embrace political violence as an instrument for obtaining power. And three, they're not organized democratically. They're organized top-down, as a cult of a personality around a charismatic or allegedly charismatic figure, right?
Okay. We live in two different worlds. They're not even parallel. They're like bizarro world and real world. I remember 2017. Who was challenging the results? We spent years with this Russian hoax nonsense. And Bill Maher sits there with the straight face, well, the Democrats have always accepted the elections. And I like Bill Maher, but I think he'll say whatever's necessary. So the next thing, so what happens if she wins? Packing the Supreme Court. Guaranteed, if they get Congress and the Senate, they will pack the Supreme Court. The proposal that they're talking about is adding 4 justices to the Supreme Court. Right now, the Republicans, the conservatives, I guess, sort of have a 6-3 majority. So now you have 3 liberals, leftists, lunatics, sometimes seem like very nice, reasonable people like Elena Kagan, but they're insane. I'm sorry, they're just insane in the way they analyze the law and the Constitution. So you have 6-3, you add 4, now what do you have? Because they will be appointed by you know who, her, Miss Word Salad. And so now you would be 7-6, and everything is on the table then. The other thing that will happen is that, and this can be done by a simple majority vote of Congress. The District of Columbia and Puerto Rico will be made states. That will give them each 2 senators, at least 1 congressman. That will flip the majorities in the House and Senate for generations, and that is not easily overturned once it's put in place. I don't know that a Republican Congress could walk that back. You're going to have state after state after state do things like, I like people in Nebraska. They've got beautiful golf courses out there in the Sand Hills, but they have put in proportional voting for their electoral votes, and that may swing the election this year. There may be one or two electoral votes that go to whoever does not win the majority of the state. Usually, whoever wins the majority in the state gets all the electoral votes. And they've changed it. I'm telling you, they are tearing the whole system down. You need to understand how important this election is. So they will pack the Supreme Court. They will do this. Here's another one. This is Jeff Clark. He's under pretty extreme persecution by the government because he was a lawyer for Trump, threatening his license and that type of thing. He's a very good thinker. And just so Glenn Kirshner, Journal, lawfare offender extraordinaire, is taking the Liz Cheney squad hoax to the next level in his latest YouTube video. This guy, Glenn Kirshner, is saying that's a threat. Trump's going to be sentenced on those 34 ridiculous felony convictions in New York in late November. And that's going to be part of the articles of impeachment. I saw the appeal on that. You can find the appeal hearing online, and I'm telling you that the attorneys that brought that case did a pathetic job. I say that with all of my any credibility I have as a lawyer that's still left. It was pathetic with the lawyers that prosecuted Trump, how they defended themselves. In fact, at the end of the hearing, they were more interested in appealing to the Court of Appeals of New York to please don't sanction us when you rule against us. That's how the hearing went. They did terrible. And those convicted, the judges, you should watch it. The judges were like, wait a minute, he paid all the loans back. What right do you have? What basis do you have for even bringing it up? Let alone convicting him of a felony and bringing in, I don't know, what was it, hundreds of millions of dollars of fines? You paid the loans back. And they wanted to do more loans with President Trump and his companies. I'm telling you, it's lawfare. And then Jeff Clark did write this article. You can find it over at Center for Renewing America, Directive 5240.01, a threat to American liberty. I don't know if you saw this. In the United States, there has long been an act. It's actually part of the common law. It was formally enacted in 1878, signed by Rutherford B. Hayes, who is from just down the road here in Delaware, Ohio. And it's called the Posse Comitatus Act. And it says you can't deploy the U.S. military against U.S. citizens. And so now they came out with this revised Directive 5240.01. It's from the Department of Defense. And it seems to undo that. And in the prior versions of 5240, they had provisions in there to protect people's civil liberties. You can't do something that's going to impact people's civil liberty, and those things have been removed. And it appears, and you are free to try to correct me if I'm wrong, it appears that they've weaponized things against people in the United States. This is egregious. Now, I've been meaning to play for a couple weeks. I don't have time to do it. You could look it up on the War Room podcast. Mike Benz Cyber is his handle on Twitter or X. Highly recommend that you follow him. He is dealing with the security apparatus of the United States and how it's been weaponized against regular Americans. And what they're doing is, this is happening on a global scale. So what happens is they can't necessarily go in. U.S. security agencies have long been, okay, you can't go search people without a warrant. So what do? They go to their friends in the UK or France and say, hey, we got these problems. Would you do the cyber search on these people and tell us what you find out? Because we're not allowed to do it, but you can share with us what you find, even though it would be illegal or improper in the United States or unconstitutional. And then by the way, we'll do the same for you. And so they have these globalist, anti-democratic fascists, the people they complain that you are, that everybody that opposes them is. Again, when the left accuses you of something, the first thing you should do is assume they're doing it. They do what they accuse you of doing. So Mike Benz, I was on War Room a couple weeks ago with Natalie Winters. Excellent interview, 16 minutes of just a wealth of information. And Mike will go for hours and hours and hours telling you about all of the way these security agencies, the letter agencies, CIA, DNI, Department of Homeland Security, all work together. And now with this Directive 5240, this is a shot across the bow. This is what we're going to do if we get complete control, and you won't be able to stop us. And so this is what's going on Tuesday is a very, very big deal. Very big. Okay, let's talk about the Middle East. Lots going on there. Israel strikes Iran. Expanding war. This is a headline I shared last week. I think it was from the Washington Post or New York Times. And sort of like, okay, Israel responds to these rocket attacks, missile attacks, and Israel's the one expanding the war when they respond. Again, it's part of the insanity that is rampant among the people here. Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan Chase spoke this week at the Institute of International Finance. I don't have a copy of the video. I've been looking for that. But this is Newsweek reporting. World War III has already begun. So Jamie Dimon would answer the question in the title this week, are we on the brink or past? Are we on or past the brink? And he would say, we're past it. We're in World War III with everything that's going on. You've got Korean troops in Ukraine. You've got Russia threatening things in the Middle East. You got Russia strengthening its alliance with Iran. You got Russia now this morning. Somebody sent me a thing. I haven't have time to read it yet. I trust her summary of it. It's Iran is threatening to send missiles into Europe. And so the question is, does Iran have nuclear weapons? And if they do, what does that change, and what's Israel going to do? So now Israel's going to, they've struck Iran. They're going to try to do some things. Here's a map of the Middle East. Israel's doing pretty well in Lebanon, although they've lost a lot of soldiers, and they've not gone very far into the country. You'll see a map of that later. Turkey has conducted over 1,000 bombing runs into the Kurdish areas of Syria and Turkey. Over 1,000. By the way, is anybody protesting that? The genocide of the Kurds, which is what I believe Erdogan would really like to do. Is he doing anything there? Or is anybody protesting that? Anybody protest all the people killed in Syria, all the Syrian refugees, all the cities bombed into oblivion by Russia and Syria? No. Nobody protests that. But defend yourself when you're attacked, boy, then we're going to protest that. We're going to do everything about it. So this is just a graphic that somebody said these are the waves. There were 3 waves of attacks last week. They probably went over a little cordon of Jordan across Syria. They took out radar installations and air defenses in Syria because they didn't want them to shoot at them on the way back. They might have snuck by them the first time, but you're not going to sneak by them twice. Then they did a second wave. They attacked targets in Iraq, Syria, Iraq, and then Iran. Then they did a second wave, and then they did a final wave. And everybody that left got home. And I saw some great pictures. I don't know if I think it might be in the next clip that I play, of some of these attacks. These planes coming back into Israel, And everybody in Israel was cheering, as these planes flew back and landed, and not a single one had damage. No one was injured. 100 planes, air refuelers did this amazing attack. I mean, it's sort of, it's well planned, but it sort of borders on the miraculous in my view. That's my opinion of it. They talk about one of the things they want to do is you want to get close enough so you can send the missile down so it comes down perpendicular to the ground, which is going to cause a lot more damage. But that's a little bit more difficult to do. But there you can kind of see a picture of what it would be like if they'd struck this and it was a perpendicular strike. It's going to burrow into the earth a ways before it does its damage. So these are the air refuelers, old B-707s. They've ordered new refuelers from the United States, but we don't have enough. And they're manufacturing them, and they're telling Israel they're not going to get them for another 2 or 3 years at least. And this sort of goes through this thing. You can find, there's a lot, this guy did a great job on his graphics of putting all of this together. So what's Iran saying? So Iran, they come out, there's been this push, this propaganda, we're going to have a united front. And so this is the big poster in Tehran that they keep changing. And on one side it says we're laughing, and the other guy's belligerent. And it's just this constant propaganda that they put on people. Again, this is the New York Times from last Sunday. They had this poster different last week. It showed the Iranian ballistic missile attack on Israel. And I do have the translation this week. If you want war, we are masters of war. Hezbollah is alive. If you want war, we are masters of war. Israel must be wiped off the face of the earth, and this is the beginning of the story. Now, does that sound like they're interested in peace of any kind? How would you interpret that if you lived in Israel? These people are our mortal enemy. Now, look, the Iranian people, a lot of them, maybe the vast majority of them may be okay, but they don't have missiles and they don't have weapons. And so the question is, what's Israel going to do? And then I just find this graphic interesting. These missiles are raining down, and right there in the middle of it is the Temple Mount and the Dome of the Rock. And you wonder okay, maybe one of those missiles will misfire a little bit. Its guidance system got a little bit off, and it's going to take out that Dome of the Rock. And that solves a lot of problems. It is not possible for me to cover everything that needs to be covered in these areas. So Iran says we're going to increase our military budget. Everybody's condemning Israel, although the West seems to be backing Israel. Leader's advisor, that's to Ayatollah Khamenei, says that Iran may change its nuclear doctrine if threats become existential. Apparently right now there's a fatwa in place against developing nuclear weapons. And so Khamenei will say, well, I never approved of the development of nuclear weapons. And, listen, that guy, if he's breathing, he's probably lying or putting out propaganda. So they're talking about a big response that's coming, an unimaginable response. Here's the headlines from the Tehran Times and Kayan International. Enemies will receive a teeth-breaking response. Wall Street Journal, Tehran is warning it will retaliate against Israel's attack. Tooth-breaking response. We will receive a crushing response. Here is Ayatollah. The Zionist regime's miscalculations must be stopped. The Zionist regime made a wrong move. The Zionist regime's miscalculations must be stopped. They're making a miscalculation with respect to Iran. They don't know Iran. They don't know the Iranian youth. And by the way, he's speaking to a youth gathering in Tehran. And on the right here, you see sort of a graphic that he put up on his website, or somebody put up on his website, Khamenei.ir. You can follow it. He has English translations. He has all his videos there. And you see all the missiles that they have underground that they're going to fire. We're prepared to confront global arrogance. These are clips of things from his webpage. Battle against global arrogance is in line with international law. Some countries in West Asia are aiding Zionists instead of Palestine. Who's he referring to in West Asia? What's in West Asia? Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Sunni Arab countries. By the way, this is kind of interesting. You see this border fortification, border wall fence? This comes from the Tehran Times. That is Iran's border fortification against Sunni Pakistan on the eastern border of Iran. This is from Al Akbar newspaper. Talking about is we're really hammering people in the north of Israel. And if you have a Red Alert app, you will see it goes off. It drains the battery on my phone overnight. It goes off. I mean, this morning it's gone off. Must have been dozens of times. I used one called Zophar. So Israel claimed in an operation that they kidnapped a Hezbollah operative in the far north of Lebanon, a naval operation. They went in and kidnapped. What Israel has done over the last 6 weeks is shocking in its coordination, its impact, its proof of its intelligence gathering. It is unmatched. I think it is unmatched in human history. And I think there's sort of a divine thing about that. So now this is interesting. So in the Arab news, you see over here, civil war decimates harvest in Sudan in Africa. And this is a country that, is in Bible prophecy. It's on the Red Sea. Russia's messing around there. Iran's messing around there, trying to get pro-Iranian, pro-Russian people in place because they want the ports that are on the Red Sea so they can control the Red Sea. They're not going to just rely on the Houthis because somebody might decimate the Houthis. But the other point of this graphic is over the past year, look at all of the refugees who have had to leave Sudan. So now Sudan is in a place where the war has decimated their harvest. They're having a massive drought there. Food is not growing, and people really are on the brink of starving, not totally unlike what's going on in Gaza. There's plenty of food, might be some distribution issues because a certain organization steals everything. And the UNRWA group has a lot of people that work for both organizations in Gaza, for Hamas and UNRWA. By the way, Israel took out one of the main terrorists there are pictures of him, you can find them very easily on the internet, of him kidnapping people and parading them through Gaza. His name was Atiwi. Israel took him out. What was the response of Antonio Guterres? We mourn the loss of our comrade in arms. He was a terrorist. That should tell you everything you need to know about a leftist, Antonio Guterres, in the UN. But look at all these refugees. How many protests on American campuses, British university campuses, anywhere that are protesting the killing and refugees things that are taking place in the Sudanese civil war, sponsored by Iran and Russia? You're not going to see it. So Israel got this guy in this naval operation. Here's a little graphic that shows this is the blue area is the area that Israel is sort of moving into in Lebanon. The pinkish area, that goes up to the Litani River. Israel's told everybody in that area and a little bit to the north, get out, leave. And Israel is doing massive destruction of homes and terror tunnels and all the infrastructure of Hamas. But look, they're moving very slowly. I think it's been more difficult, I think, than they had anticipated. Years ago, they were saying we're going to do shock and awe in 72 hours. but I haven't seen that. But they're doing a phenomenal job. There are numerous videos out there of, hang on just a second, I think I can put one of these in. Let's see. Okay, here's one. Here's an example of this is just one of many, many dozens of examples that you can find of a destruction of care tunnel system in southern Lebanon. In a lot of those, there's a lot of secondary explosions that take place because it explodes, and then there are things that they haven't even tried to detonate that get detonated because of the explosion. And they're taking out a lot of things. And so the Washington Post had this sort of hand-wringing article the other day. Israel has destroyed 20% of the things in southern Lebanon, 20% of the structures in southern Lebanon. Okay. They were, and when I've interviewed people from Alma Research that focuses on the north and what Hezbollah's been doing, they told me, you can go look up the interviews, Avraham Levine and Yaakov, can't remember his last name. I had a few interviews with them, and they said at least every other home in southern Lebanon was tied to Hezbollah in some way. Either tunnel entrance, tunnel underneath, storage of missiles, or what type of thing. Now, Amir Avivi from the IDSF, he's in the US and Canada right now, he said the other day that about 80% of the rockets have been destroyed, but as Seth Fransman said in my interview with him the other day, that still might leave 40,000 rockets that Hezbollah has. That's still, in terms of militaries around the world, that would still put them in probably the top 6 instead of the top 3 or top 2 that they used to be. And Iran's manufacturing facilities. Now, fortunately, in the north up here in Metula, what happened? Oh, I know. Did I put this over it? In Metula, that's a little area in the far north of Israel. It's surrounded on 3 sides, on the east and west and north by Lebanon. A missile rocket did come in, and it killed 5 people. And there have been about, I don't know, 12 people who've been injured or killed in rocket attacks. So the fight is coming to Israel, and they keep moving the area down that they're attacking. So if you look at Haifa, Nahariya, Pam, you remember Nahariya? We were there for dinner one night when we were in Israel. The warnings go off all the time, and it's and the goal is to get people to leave. Okay, so now everybody, and I'll talk more about this in my talk in California, but this is about what's going to happen in the Middle East. Everybody's excited. We talk about the Saudis appear that they're going to come into the Abraham Accords. But this week, the Saudis hosted this week on Wednesday and Thursday, the Global Alliance for the Implementation of the Two-State Solution in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And what do they want to do? They want to create this red area, a Palestinian state, essentially that red area. From Hebron would be included, Jerusalem would be part of it. And this, by the way, this was in the Trump plan in some respects, the Trump vision for peace and prosperity in the Middle East. And now the Saudis appear to be on board with it. Now, so here is Prince Faisal, the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia. I think is Prince Faisal bin Saud. I mean, he's got a whole bunch of names, and I think bin Saud. So he's of the Saud family, probably a cousin of Mohammed bin Salman. I'd have to look at the family tree to keep them straight. And he came out, he denounced this. He said this, Prince Faisal said ties with Israel would not be normalized without a Palestinian state, which remained the only viable solution to the Middle East conflict. In reality, the establishment of a Palestinian state is not tied to whether or not Israel accepts it. It's tied to the principles of international law. The UN resolutions that led to the establishment of the State of Israel clearly envisioned a Palestinian state as well, so we need to make that happen. So I would ask Prince Faisal, listen, okay, you're all about the UN resolutions. Jordan occupied that area from 1948 to 1967. Have you ever condemned Jordan for what they did? And the answer is no one did. Remember, Jordan had problems with the Palestinians. How many died in that Black September massacre? 18,000? They expelled them to Syria. They went to Lebanon. They caused problems in Egypt. And then the question is, so how many Palestinian refugees have any Arab countries taken in since this war started in Gaza a little over a year ago? And the answer is 0. Big, fat, goose egg, 0. How many are they going to take in the next year? Big, fat, goose egg, 0. Let Israel deal with them. And that's a problem. So now, at the start of this conference, and remember, I've said this a lot, it appears that Mohammed bin Salman is trying to change the orientation of Saudi Arabia on the Palestinian issue. And I know, don't criticize me for using the term Palestinian. I'm just telling you what everybody in the world uses. We know they're Arabs that live in Judea and Samaria, but I'm just trying to shorthand identify them, which I just did not a shorthand identification because I talked a lot about something that should be very easy to understand. But listen, and so this is a guy, he spent time in prison in Saudi Arabia. He says it's very concerning to watch, but I'm almost sure it's not him. It's the useless father, King Salman, who has changed the course in Saudi Arabia. He's very ill and has brought back his radical scholar puppets to power, which his son has unwillingly accepted. So I want you to watch Mohammed bin Salman in this clip as what he says at the beginning of this conference, the Global Alliance for the Implementation of the Two-State Solution in Palestine. Here's what he says. Your Majesties, Excellencies, and His Highnesses, the displacement of the residents of Gaza. It also affirms that it holds the occupying authorities responsible for the crimes committed against the Palestinian people and their capabilities. We are certain that the only way to achieve security, peace, and stability in the region is to end the occupation, siege, and settlement, and for the Palestinian people to obtain their legitimate rights and establish their independent state within the borders of 1967 with East Jerusalem as capital. This ensures the sustainability of security and stability of the region. Peace be upon you. Now, I'm just telling you, as I've seen a lot of interviews with him, and he does not seem like that's really coming from the heart. I think he's under severe threat and distress. Understand, this man is very, very powerful. This week in Saudi Arabia was FII8, the Financial Institute Initiative 8th conference. At the first conference back in 2017, that's when Mohammed bin Salman came out and announced the Saudi Vision 2030. There's that date again, 2030. I think this is very significant in a lot of the world. You have the sustainability goals for 2030 at the UN. You have the Pact for the Future. 2030 seems to revolve around this. But understand who this Mohammed bin Salman is. I'm going to play a clip for you. This is Arabic of what bin Salman had to say a number of years ago. The war of the Saudis is my war that I fight personally. I don't want to die before seeing the Middle East at the forefront of the world. And I believe it will be achieved 100%. And so this thing, look at all the world leaders that he meets with all the time. This is an incredibly powerful person who has said the Palestinians are not our issue. And now all of a sudden they have this, at this time, in this context, you have him coming out and saying, Palestinian state, 1967 borders, So he did the Vision 2030 thing a number of years ago, digital transformation. So he's elevated women, but look at this Vision 2030, you got NEOM. Now they've scaled that back some, but these are parts of the NEOM. These are things that some of them have already been built and started. Mountain resort, ocean resort, island resort. A gateway to technological advancement in the kingdom. And this was a theme at the FII thing. Here's Prince Faisal talking at the FII 8th conference.
The kingdom is very different than it was 20, 30 years ago. And that means the dynamics are somewhat different. We are working together very, very differently. And it also means that we are playing a bigger role in our own national security interests. It also means that we are much more active in diverse partnerships.
So you can go watch all that conference if you want. Everybody puts it, and that's, by the way, of the important business technological conferences in the world, the Financial FII Institute is one of the most important. You've got Davos, you got the World Government Summit in the United Arab Emirates. You have the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, SPIEF, in St. Petersburg, Russia, and then you have the Saudi FII Institute. And one of the things they talked about this week, I mean, this is the thing that just came out last week also, this is the Muqab. This is what they're building, this cubic thing. I think it plays a play on the Kaaba in Mecca, which Saudi Arabia controls. But look at some of the things
As if the line wasn't enough, Saudi Arabia is currently busy constructing yet another amazing skyscraper, named the Muqab. Taking the form of a super tall cube, new information has been released that details the build progress so far and the sheer scale of the project. The Muqab will reach a height of 400 meters in the Saudi capital Riyadh, but more impressively it will also be just as long and wide, making it so large that, according to the Saudi government's public investment fund, it could fit 20 Empire State Buildings inside of it. And it will actually be the world's largest building. Its decorative exterior is inspired by traditional Islamic architecture, while its interior will have a floor space of around 2 million square meters. At its center will be another large twisting tower. Think of it like a big box with a large twisting structure inside. The Muqab will also feature some kind of holographic system that will be used to depict underwater and strange otherworldly scenes inside the cube structure, which all sounds a little reminiscent of the Sphere's fancy 4D immersive cinematic experience, but we've no further details yet. Excavation work is almost complete and 10 million cubic meters of earth has been moved to date. The excavation process has required the daily use of roughly 250 excavators and over 400 pieces of equipment to manage all the soil, with construction workers putting in a total of around 3 million hours of labor so far. Additionally, a bridge is being constructed to allow everything to move smoothly. Developer explains that New Maraba will also construct a temporary bridge that will serve as a critical enabler, connecting the construction site by crossing King Khalid Road. This connection will facilitate ongoing development and pave the way for the initiation of Muqab piling in the coming months. The bridge is expected to reduce approximately 800,000 truck movements on public roads for earthworks alone, showcasing a positive impact on the surrounding infrastructure. With around 900 workers on site daily, work is advancing rapidly, bringing the destination closer. Completion of the Muqab is expected by 2030.
There's that date again. So look, I know there's a lot of disagreement in the Bible prophecy community over the Babylon. Some say it's America, some say Saudi Arabia, some say Babylon. I'm just saying this is one that's being built. Okay, this one's underway. I don't know if it is. Okay, time will tell. And by the way, when I say, I've questioned whether America's Mystery Babylon and Revelation, people say, well, Revelation's not in order. Well, that's no answer, because when the description is of the Mystery Babylon in Revelation 17, there's 10 kings. So identify the 10 kings. And I'm sorry, but nobody ever does that. And I think that's a big flaw in that reasoning. And they'll say, well, that's not in order. Well, it's part of the passage. So, but listen, that doesn't mean that I don't think America is not deserving of judgment for the things that we've done. So, by the way, speaking of royals, and people who think, that he might be the Antichrist, there's a big article in the Times of London today about the property empires that fund the royals. And I mean, they own stuff all over England. They get all this money. But my question is, so the guy who's into the Mukhab, Neom, Octagon, Turinga, does this seem like the guy who's going, unless something is going on, he's going to cave on the two-state solution? It seems like the world is trying to put in place something that they're going to shove down Israel's throat. I've contended this for a long period of time. By the way, want to know another thing that's going to happen if she gets elected? Even if she doesn't get elected, watch out what happens with executive orders, UN Security Council resolutions. We know this is what Obama did back in 2016 on Resolution 2334. The UN Security Council did not veto it. This time, I think they'll vote for it if Trump wins. They're going to put as many roadblocks in place to everything that he might want to do as possible. You think Directive 5240 is the last of what they're going to do if they lose the election? No, they're going all in on this. And look, they could file articles of impeachment even if they lose the election, because you might have some Republicans who'll vote for them in the House. I'm telling you, I don't think we have any idea what's happening. So I want to play for you a couple clips. So these are probably going to take about 15 minutes, because I want you to understand what's going on in Saudi Arabia with regard to some of these massive buildings. So this is one that was started back about 20 years ago, the Royal Clock Tower in Mecca, next to the Kaaba, the holiest site of Islam. At least now it is. I mean, I don't know that it was originally. I think it started praying towards Petra, but that's another topic. I want you to look at this video. This just came out about 4 weeks ago about some of the statistics about the Royal Clock Tower that overlooks the Kaaba in Mecca.
This is one of the biggest and tallest buildings in the world. But you've probably never heard of it. The Mecca Royal Clock Tower is a triumph of engineering. At 35 times the size of Big Ben, it has the world's largest clock. With an estimated cost of $16 billion, it's one of the most expensive buildings ever constructed. And at 600 meters high, it contains what is to this day the highest occupied man-made space on the planet. Seeing the tower rise above the city of Mecca, it's hard to get a true sense of its unbelievable scale. This building is in fact so huge that we need to take a moment to show it in comparison to the tallest building in Europe, the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere, the tallest building in Asia, and of course the tallest building in the world. In whatever city you place it, from Sydney to LA, this clock tower would utterly dominate the skyline. Construction firms from over 10 different countries worked on the skyscraper, including a German firm which designed the clock. But because of its location in Mecca, many of the engineers and architects couldn't visit the site. After all, only Muslims are allowed in the sacred city.
Mecca is very conservative. There's a passport control. There is like a border going into another country.
Some of the construction team, including glazing experts from Poland and Germany, converted to Islam so they could work on the projects.
The company Riva is near Stuttgart in Germany. And their owner, he converted to Islam during that project to be able to come on site and see for himself what's going on and what's happening.
This is the wild story of how one of the world's most unique and ostentatious skyscrapers was built.
Okay, now, what does it represent? Okay, did you hear that, though? People involved with the project converted to Islam so they could go to Saudi Arabia and be on site to help with the project. Germans, converted to Islam to run the engineering thing. Did you hear that? Okay, now this is what it represents. Then I've got a clip about the Shia Sunni thing that I think is just absolutely mind-blowing. And then I have another clip about this. So and we'll get done when we get done. So this is what they designed the clock tower. Originally, they were going to build a clock. So there's two aspects to this. One is, what was it going to be? Well, what happens when they build a mosque someplace? Go out to Dublin and look at the towers around the mosque. The minaret always is the highest thing in the city, right? That's what they do. Okay, now, so they go to the mountainous region of Mecca. You see the mountains all around, and they build this thing. What is it that they build?
The religious tourism market is the second largest source of income for Saudi Arabia after hydrocarbons. It contributes some $12 billion annually to the kingdom's economy. That means that Mecca has the largest number of hotel rooms in the Arab world, far surpassing Dubai. It's perhaps then not a huge surprise that this enormous hotel would be constructed here.
And due to the nature of it sitting so closely to the Kaaba and in this very, let's say, sensitive environment, the client reached out to us and wanted to elaborate with us ideas on bringing more meaning to the building.
The hotel needed to be more than just a commercial building because of its location. It needed to be something spiritual.
So we started thinking about what such a building could stand for. And then one of the ideas that was created in those several meetings and brainstormings was that the main tower could function as the minaret of Mecca. At the time when it was planned, would have been the highest building in the world.
Well, when it was started, it was going to be the tallest building in the world. The biggest minaret in the world, right next to the Kaaba, is controlled by the Saudi royal family. So I'm just saying would the king who's in charge of all this, would he just cave on the two-state solution unless something else was going on in the background? Because you remember, a year ago, he did that interview with Brett Baer, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and said, yeah, we're on the verge of normalization. Something changed in the last year. I don't know what it is. I'm just telling you is something is going on. And I think it's significant. And I do think it relates to Bible prophecy. And we can argue about covenant and all this stuff of Daniel 9 and that type of thing. But I'm just telling you is, I think we're at this stage where we're going to have to start reformulating some of our conclusions about things. Now, that may require humbleness on some of your parts. Not mine, of course, but I was going to say something about arguments from silence. I hate arguments from silence, except when they work in my favor, which is occasional. So I'm going to play one more clip about this clock tower. I want you to listen closely and remember the description of the Antichrist. And I'm not making a conclusion, okay? But I'm just saying is one of the things that he will do seems to be in this video, if this is correct.
Turning this hotel into an enormous minaret wasn't enough. The client wanted even more. Time plays an important role in Islam. There is, of course, the call to prayer that happens 5 times a day. The adhan is the first call to prayer and is usually made from the top of the minaret. The idea of then making this building into a clock tower as well came very naturally. Now, this clock would establish a new second time standard in addition to Greenwich Mean Time. All over the world, Muslims would be able to know the precise atomic time in Mecca. That would allow Muslims to begin holidays and special occasions like Ramadan simultaneously, regardless of where they are on Earth.
So when these things come about, they're going to come about in different ways, maybe not the way that we think. And I'm not saying I've made a conclusion about this or anything like that, but I do know Daniel says at the appointed time, or when this person comes on the scene, he will try to what? Change times and seasons. And I'm just saying, and the interesting thing about this is a totally secular pro-Saudi Arabian project. Now, there's a conflict between Sunni and Shia, and so there's this video here.
The average.
This is Rawan Osman. She grew up in Syria. She grew up in a home where one parent was Sunni and one parent was Shia. So it's sort of like, if you want the conflict of the ages in the Islamic world, grow up in that kind of home. So what did she do? She left and she went to Israel. And she said, I went to Israel to get to know the Zionists, and I love them. So she was on Elon Levy, The State of the Nation. This is one of the most incredible interviews about a month ago. I want you to listen to part of this, about 5 minutes. You really need to listen to it. You should go, and I think there's a link in the show notes to the entire video. And here we go. Rawan Osman, incredibly articulate, smart woman. Here we go.
Arab citizen believes the lies. This is why they consist the majority in the Arab and Islamic worlds. But those educated and intelligent, they don't support Iran, and they live in the West for good reasons. Now, those who live in the West, after their families escaped from the Arab world or from Islamic countries, and they want a caliphate where they live, whether in Hamburg or in Amsterdam or in Philadelphia. Now that seems to me as a mental disease. They don't understand what they're asking for, and I advise, careful what you wish for. Because if you get it, you will understand then what do they mean by a caliphate.
See what she's wearing?
I don't know, haven't we seen a sample of that when ISIS took over parts of Iraq and Syria?
And if we can just go back, because I'm still trying to understand the connection between Sunni terrorist groups and their Shia patron, the tension between Saudi Arabia and Iran, their geopolitical competition in the region. Does that have anything to do with the ancient theological schisms between Sunni and Shia Islam? Or is this idea of a contest between the Sunni and Shia worlds simply a fiction of, figment of the imagination of Western academics now, and it has nothing to do with that?
No, absolutely. There's the Sunnis and the Shia, at the end of the day, they are set to kill one another because they have conflicting narratives. And who's gonna rule and govern the Islamic world? The Shia think that they are the righteous ones, and yet Mecca is in Saudi Arabia. So the pilgrimage happens there, and it generates a lot of money. And it gives an authoritarian role to Saudi Arabia. This is why they lead the Islamic world. Now imagine this. Imagine if Iran could have Jerusalem. It would be somehow the equivalent of Mecca. They could, if they restored that, they could lead the Islamic world, not only the Arab world.
Oh, that's fascinating. So you're saying that essentially part of the reason that Iran is so committed to supporting terrorist organizations that want to conquer Jerusalem in the name of Islam, and that it's pushing for Palestinian statehood, is because it knows that that Palestinian state would be an Iranian client state, and that Iranian control of Jerusalem would put them on a par with Saudi Arabia for control of the entire Islamic world.
Absolutely. As simple as that. They want to lead the Islamic world. This is why they portray Saudi Arabia as a traitor of their cause, of the Islamic Ummah, and they are set to restore the dignity and one of the holy sites of Islam. Yeah.
And therefore, those in the West who are calling for the creation of a Palestinian state that would control the old city of Jerusalem, knowing that the Iranian regime plans to flood the region with weapons and turn a future state of Palestine into an Iranian client state, just like Gaza and Lebanon and Yemen are Iranian client states, are in fact playing straight into the hands of the theocrats in Tehran who want to control Jerusalem in order to take leadership of the Islamic world. People who are supporting a Palestinian capital in East Jerusalem over the old city are playing straight into the hands of the Iranian regime's plans for regional domination.
Yes, and I think that is why Jordan and Egypt will help Israel, no matter what, because they know what it means if Iran, after having a corridor, it's way larger than a corridor, meanwhile, through Iraq, Syria, and southern Lebanon, they know what it means if they took over Palestine, what it means for them, because they are Sunni states who collaborate with the West. So when Iran attacked Israel, they were helping the Israelis fend against the Iranian attack. They didn't do it because they wanted to protect the Israelis. They do it because they know if the Iranians took over, they don't stand a chance in the region.
And so when Israel attacked Iran, this is very interesting. What did they do? They went through the Iranian corridor, through Lebanon, through Syria, through Iraq to attack Iran. It was an in-your-face attack on an epic scale on many levels, psychological as well as physical. And she's exactly right. But so the narrative is, so this is why when you see the memorial pages, they haven't updated them, Mike. I think they're behind because so many of them have been killed. The Hezbollah memorial pages of the fighters, Nasrallah doesn't even have his own page yet. I don't think he's been buried yet for his at least in a formal ceremony, because it would be, what's the saying, a target-rich environment if they had that for him. But all their memorial pages say he was martyred. In fact, on the Al-Manar website, martyred, Nasrallah's picture, the Dome of the Rock, martyred on the road to Jerusalem, because that's what this is all about. That's prophetic stuff. Now, I'm just saying we need to pay attention to this. We need to kind of set aside some of our preconceived notions that it's going to be this or it's going to be European or something like that. I don't know that. I'm just saying I'm giving you facts on the ground right now. And this lady, pray for her protection. She is brave beyond brave. And this is an issue. This is an issue in our election. So I'm going to play one more clip about I've got tons and tons of stuff. So Tuesday night, Calvary Chapel of Harbor in Huntington Beach. Go to their website and watch it live at about 7 p.m. Eastern. And you should be able to get to sleep eventually after that takes place. And I know this is a guy that's not popular, but I think you need to listen to what he had to say. This took place at a rally for Kamala Harris in Michigan the other day. And 31 years ago, I was in Washington, D.C., just by happenstance, the day the Oslo Accords, there's that Accords term again, signed on the White House lawn. And I spent the next day at Congress with my good friend from high school who was a congressman, and we talked about it because he was Jewish, and that was a big deal. What happened on the White House lawn? Yasser Arafat shaking hands with Yitzhak Rabin. And so in the context of all this, Bill Clinton spoke at a rally for Kamala Harris in Michigan, where Dearborn Stan is located. I think it's very important that you listen to what he had to say. Just 3 minutes, please.
Let me talk about the hardest issue here in Michigan is the Middle East. And I have to be careful what I say because there's only one president at a time, and none of us can get ahead of where we're going. But I think we're going to have to essentially start again on the peace process. And I understand why young Palestinian and Arab Americans in Michigan think too many people have died. I get that. But if you lived in one of those kibbutzim in Israel, right next to Gaza, where the people there were the most pro-friendship with Palestine, most pro-two-state solution of any of the Israeli communities, were the ones right next to Gaza. And Hamas butchered them. And so then the people who criticize it are essentially saying, yeah, but look how many people you've killed in retaliation. So how many is enough for you to kill to punish them for the terrible things they did? That all sounds nice until you realize, what would you do if it was your family and you hadn't done anything but support a homeland for the Palestinians, and one day they come for you and slaughter the people in your village? You would say, well, you'll have to forgive me, I'm not keeping score that way. It isn't how many we've had to kill, because Hamas makes sure that they're shielded by civilians. They'll force you to kill civilians if you want to defend yourself. And look, I worked on this hard. And the only time Yasser Arafat didn't tell me the truth was when he promised me he was going to accept the peace deal that we had worked out, which would have given the Palestinians a state on 96% of the West Bank and 4% of Israel, and they got to choose where the 4% of Israel was. So they would have the effect of the same land of all the West Bank. They would have a capital in East Jerusalem. They would have I can hardly talk about this. And they would have equal access all day, every day, to the security towers that Israel maintained all through the West Bank up to the Golden Heights. All this was offered, including, I will say it again, a capital in East Jerusalem and 2 of the 4 quadrants of the old city of Jerusalem, confirmed by the Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and his cabinet. And they said no.
Now, I'm sure that at the end of this, there's not, and he went on for 42 minutes, which was pretty typical Bill Clinton, say a few words, that's 42 minutes. Sort of like asking me to say something in 25 minutes is not going to happen. That's like when somebody talked about the 3-hour interviews that we need to do. I'm all for that. I mean, I just think, well, that's great. Let's do it. I think it took a lot of courage for Bill. I want to give him props for saying what he said in Michigan, within earshot of Dearbornistan. And I do think, look, I think staying married to Hillary Clinton for a long time will give you a certain amount of courage. Okay? This is crazy. So there are links in the show notes to there's several articles. One is Abigail Schreier, who's written about the trans issue quite a bit. She has an article at the Free Press, Barry Weiss's website. It's actually pretty good. You ought to follow her podcast. Don't agree with her politically, but she left the New York Times. She's Jewish. She couldn't stand it there anymore for obvious reasons. Abigail Schreier says she's got this great article at the Free Press called The Kindergarten Intifada. What they are doing in Los Angeles, I've got videos. They are teaching their teachers to take kids to pro-Palestinian marches and putting them on buses and say, don't put them on a bus that's got school markings on it because we want to fake them out. We're going to indoctrinate your kids this way. And that brave lady who was interviewed by Elon Levy, Robin Osman, she would say, You want to do this in the West, in Philadelphia, and I would add in Los Angeles and Southern California, it's a mental disease. That's the kind thing that you would say. The other thing we'd say is we're in this enormous, huge, overarching spiritual battle with the forces. The Prince of Persia is active all over the stinking world, folks. This is a battle of spiritual proportions. It's an end-time battle, and it's something that we're living in right now, right here. And you see, so go get Abigail Schreier's article, read it, and then also Caroline Glick put this up. Links in the show notes also at Commentary Magazine. Purging Jews from the arts. Arts associations all over the country are saying, you're Jewish, you can't write for us, you can't draw, you can't paint, you're banned. They're making the arts in the United States Jude and rhyme. Folks, I don't know how to convey to you what I feel. So I think, listen, the interview with Elon Levy of that brave lady, that alone should make this update go viral. Please share it, like, subscribe, follow us, and there's B-52s being sent into the United States by the United States. And then in the midst of this, we have this horrible thing in Spain, hundreds of people dead, hundreds missing. Look at these flash floods that took place. Look at the video on the right. The flash flood down the street in Valencia. We had friends that lived there. Look at how the cars piled up. And the people said, we didn't get any warnings of this till we were in our car on the way to work. And we couldn't go anywhere. You see that? There's not a lot of exits. So this is a kind of a picture that shows how things went in, how the thing changed in Valencia area. You see the extent of the flooding? Pretty quickly, a lot of volunteers, people very upset. And I'll close. I promise this is the last thing. I promise you have my word on this. So the subject came up at the European Investment Bank, the floods in Valencia. And what do you think this globalist, climatist lunatic had to say about it? Listen to this.
The floods this week in Spain show that climate change is a reality. It is imposing increasing costs on our economy, so it is a no-brainer that we need to invest in this green transition, invest in resilience, invest in adaptation to climate change, on top of trying to mitigate climate change. And actually, this is not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do, because $1 that is invested into adaptation and resilience saves 5 to 7 in damages and repairs, and not to talk about those losses that are not repairable. So from this point of view, I think we have to
rule of thumb is don't invest in anything she said. By the way, her name is Nadia Calvino. I guess she's a Calvinist of some kind. It's the world. I think I've answered my own question. Are we on the brink? Are we on or past the brink? I think we're past the brink, officially. So pray for your safety, vote, and batten down the hatches, I guess. So pray for everybody's safety. Okay, let's pray and let's... I think net zero refers to the mentality of people behind this, but that's another subject. Okay, let's pray. Lord, we do thank you for giving us the opportunity to live at this time when the issues of the spiritual battle that we're engaged in are so crystal clear. Use that clarity to motivate us to share the gospel with those around us, because things can change very quickly and very dramatically by the hour. Just pray that you will safeguard us, give us courage and wisdom, and bless us this week in Jesus' name.